The story of modern defending is often told through the lens of tactical evolution. The introduction of the high defensive line, the requirement for centre-backs to split the penalty box during goal kicks, and the modern premium placed on a defender's ability to pass through lines of pressure. Today, we marvel at the composure of players who step forward into midfield, ice-cool under the intense press of modern forwards. Yet, to discover the true genesis of this style, one must look back to a time when English football was characterized by a far more primitive philosophy. In an era dominated by hulking, uncompromising central defenders whose primary mandate was to clear the ball into the stands, a slender Scotsman arrived on Merseyside and single-handedly altered the spatial geometry of the game. Alan Hansen was not merely a cog in the historic Liverpool machine of the late 1970s and 1980s, he was a tactical prophet. He was a player who performed with a level of cerebral elegance and technical poise that made him an anomaly in his own time and the definitive blueprint for the 21st century defender. To truly appreciate why Alan Hansen was decades ahead of his time, one must understand the hostile environment of the English First Division in 1977. When Bob Paisley signed a 21-year-old Hansen from Partick Thistle for a modest fee of £100,000, British football was locked in an era of aggressive, direct physicality. Centre-backs were judged by the mud on their shorts, the scars on their foreheads, and their willingness to engage in 90 minutes of aerial warfare with brute centre-forwards. The standard instructions for a defender under pressure were simple: eliminate risk, kick the ball as far up the pitch as possible, and let the forwards fight for the second ball. Hansen, however, rejected this industrial approach entirely. He possessed an innate, almost aristocratic composure that refused to be rushed by the chaos surrounding him. Where others saw a threat to be cleared, Hansen saw an opening to be exploited. Hansen's genius lay in his exceptional spatial awareness and his refusal to panic. When a long ball was launched toward the Liverpool penalty box, Hansen would rarely engage in an unrefined aerial duel if he could avoid it. Instead, he would use his elite reading of the game to drop off, intercept the ball on his chest or his instep, and immediately bring it under control. This was a revolutionary act at the time. To the traditionalists in the stands and the dugouts, a centre-back trapping the ball inside his own penalty box under pressure was a form of sporting heresy. It was viewed as an unnecessary gamble. But for Hansen, it was the most logical action available. He understood a fundamental truth that modern tactical systems are built upon. If you win the ball back and immediately kick it away, you are simply handing the initiative back to the opposition. By bringing the ball down, Hansen instantly shifted Liverpool from a defensive posture into a dangerous counter-attacking phase. Once the ball was at his feet, Hansen's transformation into a modern regista from deep was complete. He possessed the close control and balance of an elite midfield playmaker. Rather than laying the ball off to a fullback or launching a hopeful long pass, Hansen would frequently do something that terrified opposing managers. He would glide forward, out of the defensive line. With his upright posture, elegant stride, and eyes constantly scanning the horizon, he would carry the ball 20, 30, or 40 yards up the pitch. This forward surge completely dismantled the defensive structures of the opposition. In the 1980s, teams were trained to mark the midfield and the forwards rigidly. When a central defender suddenly bypassed his own midfield and drove directly at the opposition's backline, it created a tactical paradox. An opposing midfielder would have to step out to confront him, which inevitably opened up a passing lane to the likes of Kenny Dalglish or Ian Rush. This ability to step out of the backline and break lines with precise vertical passing is exactly what modern coaches demand from elite centre-backs today. Hansen was executing these complex transitions 50 years before the phrase ball-playing defender became a staple of football jargon. He was a master of the hidden tempo of the game. He knew exactly when to slow a match down by circulating possession across the back four, and exactly when to inject a sudden burst of vertical speed by playing a crisp forward pass into the feet of his strikers. This tactical maturity allowed Bob Paisley's Liverpool, and later the teams managed by Joe Fagan and Kenny Dalglish, to dominate not just domestically, but on the pristine, tactically advanced pitches of Europe. In the European Cup, where continental teams were accustomed to English sides playing a direct long ball game, Hansen's elegance was Liverpool's secret weapon. He could match the technical sophistication of the Italian, German and Spanish masters, proving that British defenders could be thinkers rather than just fighters. Paradoxically, Hansen's elegance often led to an unfair critique of his defensive capabilities. Because he rarely looked flustered, and because his shorts were often clean at the final whistle, some critics accused him of lacking the physical grit required for the English game. It was a criticism born out of a profound misunderstanding of his style. Hansen didn't need to make sliding tackles because his positioning was so flawless that he was almost always in the right place to intercept the ball before a tackle became necessary. He was a practitioner of preventive defending. He read the body language of opposing midfielders, anticipated their passes, and quietly extinguished threats before they could develop into emergencies. When he did have to defend physically, he used leverage, timing rather than brute force. He proved that defending was an intellectual pursuit, a game of chess played at high speed rather than a gladiatorial contest. This intellectual approach to the sport was further amplified in his post-playing career, where he revolutionized the landscape of football punditry in the United Kingdom. Joining the BBC's iconic Match of the Day in the early 1990s, Hansen brought the same forensic, analytical eye to the television studio that he had utilized on the pitch. Before Hansen, television punditry was often superficial, consisting of recycled clichés, praise for effort, and a focus purely on goals. Hansen introduced a generation of viewers to the concept of defensive analysis. He pioneered the use of video playback technology to dissect mistakes, famously introducing the phrase diabolical defending into the football lexicon. He would highlight a centre-back's body shape, point out a full-back who had failed to track a runner, or explain how a lack of communication had caused a defensive line to collapse. In doing so, he educated the viewing public, shifting the conversation away from casual fandom toward a deeper, more tactical understanding of the sport. The tragedy of Hansen's international career is another element that underscores how unique he was. Despite being the most decorated and accomplished defender in British football, he accumulated only 26 caps for Scotland. The Scottish national team management during the 1980s, frequently influenced by a preference for the rugged, traditional partnership of Willie Miller and Alex McLeish from Aberdeen, often viewed Hansen's elegant style as a luxury they couldn't afford in the high-stakes environment of international qualifiers. It remains one of the great historical anomalies that a player who won 3 European Cups and 8 league titles was routinely left on the bench or omitted from international squads. It was a glaring example of regional tactical conservatism, failing to recognize a global pioneer. Hansen's legacy at Liverpool is secure, written in the golden ink of the club's most successful era. He made 620 appearances over 14 years, captaining the side to their historic League and FA Cup double in 1986. He was the common denominator in 3 distinct generations of Anfield greatness, transitioning seamlessly from playing alongside Emlyn Hughes and Phil Thompson to anchoring the defence with Mark Lawrenson, and later guiding a young Gary Ablett. His partnership with Lawrenson in the early to mid-1980s is widely regarded as one of the finest defensive pairings in the history of the world game, a duo that combined Hansen's spatial intelligence with Lawrenson's recovery pace to create an almost unbreakable barrier. To watch old footage of Alan Hansen today is a surreal experience for any student of modern football tactics. If you strip away the grain of the film, the short shorts, and the muddy pitches of the 1980s, his movements look entirely contemporary. He plays the game with the same composure, the same distribution angles, and the same elegant arrogance that we see in modern icons like Virgil van Dijk. He was a man stranded in the wrong decade, a 21st century footballer operating in a 20th century world. He proved that a defender could be the primary playmaker of a team, that composure was more powerful than aggression, and that the ultimate weapon on a football pitch was not a player's physical strength, but his mind. In the final analysis, Alan Hansen was years ahead of his time because he saw where the sport was going before the rest of the world had even realized it needed to change. He elevated defending from a crude act of destruction into a sophisticated art form of construction. He challenged the very identity of British football, forcing a skeptical public to accept that brilliance could be quiet, that power could be elegant, and that a centre-back could be the most beautiful player on the pitch to watch. As the modern game continues to evolve around the principles of building from the back and line-breaking passes, it is clear that we are not watching a new style of football. We are simply watching the world finally catch up to the standard that Alan Hansen set half a century ago. He remains the architect of the modern defence, a silent revolutionary whose elegance will forever ripple through the DNA of the beautiful game.